Twitter's legal team is saying that Elon Musk has violated their NDA, which could put his takeover of the social media site in jeopardy.
And on Friday, Musk tweeted that Twitter deal temporarily on hold pending details supporting calculation that spam/fake accounts do indeed represent less than 5% of users, which he has said is a sticking point. He goes on to say, quote, any sensible random sampling process is fine if many people independently get similar results. For percentage of fake spam duplicate accounts, that will be telling. I picked 100 as the sample size number because that is what Twitter uses to calculate. Then on Saturday, Musk tweeted that Twitter accused him of violating their non-disclosure agreement. Twitter Legal just called to complain that I violated their NDA by revealing the bot check sample size is 100. This actually happened.
Well, here to discuss with us is culture writer, novelist, and columnist at Unheard, Kat Rosenfeld, and host of A Fresh Perspective, contributor for Red State and Liberty Nation, Jeff Charles. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us on here on the show. So, I mean, it seems like he maybe then violated the NDA again by saying they called me to say I violated the NDA. Kat, what do you make of this?
It kind of strikes me that maybe both Elon and Twitter are looking for a reason to kind of throw a wrench in this entire deal, and each blame the other for it. I wouldn't blame him either, if he was trying to sort of, find a way to sour things because he'd changed his mind.
Yeah. What do you think, Jeff? What are the chances this actually goes through and Elon acquires Twitter? I think they're probably pretty low.
I think it's still too early, honestly, Robbie. I think it's too early to count this whole thing out. I mean, I think that it's very much possible that Elon might be trying to negotiate for a lower price. I mean, because if either party backs out, they have to pay $1 billion. So I think it's still too early to rule this whole thing out yet. I think maybe this is just part of the process.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Elon has consistently talked about the spam, fake accounts, etc., as this major point of concern for him, while simultaneously, talking about the climate of free expression on the platform. He thinks too much content is moderated that ought not to be moderated, that in some heavy-handed and political way, he's actually been much more open on Twitter, talking on Twitter about the biases against the right that he perceives, for instance. Kat, do you think is there any almost something at odds there between saying, no, we need to take down all these kinds of accounts that are so-called spam or fake, but we also have to have this much less regulatory environment so that everyone can feel free to express what they think?
I don't know that there's so much tension there. I mean, I think that, there's this attempt to kind of implement some kind of quality control, some kind of moderation, which it's widely accepted that you need on social media networks if they're going to remain usable. It seems like Elon Musk wants to implement this in such a way that actual human beings are maximally able to express themselves, but that there's not a lot of sort of fake accounts, bots, and so on, clouding things up, contributing to toxicity. It's an interesting question. I suspect that what makes Twitter a toxic place is actually human behavior. I don't think that it's bots. So I don't think that this is going to be the solution he's looking for, but I don't necessarily think there's a tension between those two things.
Yeah, Jeff, are you active much on Twitter? Do you find yourself inundated by bots? I don't feel like I see a whole lot of bots on there. I mean, I do know that they're existing. I see certain accounts that, when you go, they're clearly all just a bunch of advertisements because the bot has taken over. But otherwise, I don't really see this big of a problem. I mean, are you experiencing a giant problem with bots on Twitter?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'm on Twitter probably more than I should be. And that being said, I do see a decent number of bots, and sometimes it's hard to tell. But sometimes I'll get some responses on my TL, and I'd be like, oh, that's a bot. And they do kind of add some toxicity into the equation. But I have to agree with Kat. Most of the toxicity comes from regular people. But I will say, with all the concerns over misinformation, we know that Russia and other foreign powers try to use bots as well to spread misinformation. So, I agree. I don't think that there is a tension between those two. I just think that, as far as toxicity goes, there's not much that Musk can do about that.
Yeah, Kim, it's all those pro-Kim Russian bots in our YouTube comments, right? That's what I've accused you of.
Yeah, Robbie accuses me of having a bunch of a bot army that goes around commenting.
Kim Iverson Nation. That's a YouTube problem, not a Twitter problem. But it's been interesting to me to see Elon Musk, historical, and he said, right, that he would not have considered himself previously a figure of the right. He's someone who makes environmentally friendly automobiles, right? That's his major kind of contribution. The space stuff would not have been coded in a left or right direction until recently. I'm not even really sure that it is coded. It's one of the only things that isn't really coded is like space exploration. Yeah, I'm sure it'll get there, but I guess there was some from the left being.
It is. Yeah,
right, billionaires going to space. Shouldn't you invest your money here? That kind of thing that I found somewhat obnoxious. But my point being, but Elon is now sort of coded as a figure on the right. At least the reaction to his attempt to purchase Twitter, the thunderous kind of condemnation from the mainstream media, like, oh my, this is the end of days. This is this is like the Nazi takeover of Twitter. I mean, this is the kind of paranoia in fairly mainstream circles you were seeing, that I was seeing. What do you make of this kind of dynamic, Kat? And what does this say about, I guess, again, the problem is people, how unhealthy we all are to be so freaked out about this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that for the media, journalism, and academia crew who kind of hangs out on Twitter the most, that the perception that Elon might come in and take it over was sort of like, here comes this sort of coarse person stinking up the country club in a certain way. They wanted to preserve this space that was very friendly to them, and the sense that a person might be coming into power and starting to sort of make rules in that space that were not necessarily sympathetic to their particular ideologies or worldviews. That was suddenly very threatening and very frightening in a we want to maintain the sanctity of our club kind of way.
Jeff, do you still hope that Elon takes it over?
Oh, yes, very much so. I'm loving this whole thing. And to piggyback off of what Kat said, there was somebody else who disrupted a major institution. His name was Donald Trump. So Elon Musk is doing to Twitter what Trump did to the Republican Party and the political system. And I'm here for it. As far as him being on the right, Elon Musk is not on the right. I mean, when you hear people say that, you have to consider the source. I mean, this is coming from people who think that anybody who's to the right of Bernie Sanders is a far-right extremist. And I think we have to be careful with that, because Elon may agree with the right on certain things, but it doesn't mean that he's necessarily a conservative.
Yeah, Jeff, how do you think it's happened that now saying things like, I want free speech, I want an exchange of ideas, I want a platform to try to approach the discourse with some neutrality and not, massively bias it in favor of progressives of the Democratic Party or any one ideology, and saying that, which would have been a very benign or maybe even liberal kind of statement of principle, is now considered a hard right viewpoint?
It's amazing how that happened, Robbie. I mean, because it used to be the left, especially in Berkeley, who was advocating for free speech, and the pendulum has swung the other way. I mean, and I think when you're in a situation where your views are being suppressed, yeah, you're going to glom on to the spirit of that First Amendment. So, I mean, I still think that there are plenty of people on the left who value free speech. I mean, it's mostly the far left who's complaining about it. But if you take your average person who maybe votes Democrat, they want free speech too, and they want a free exchange of ideas.
Yeah. What do you think about this, Kat? It's a problem that I started noticing maybe 10 years ago, but it gets worse and worse, and has reached some fever pitch almost of hostility to the idea of free speech, or the idea of people disagreeing with you, or what if somebody says something wrong, it's going to be misinformation, it needs to be policed. I find it to be just a very concerning development that is so pervasive in maybe the far left. It's pretty pervasive in a kind of mainstream progressive circle as well, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it does seem to be. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when, we on the left had to advocate very hard for, the cross submerged in urine to be shown at the Brooklyn Museum. Or I may be conflating two things. But, I have a theory that this is actually related to the kind of shift in where power has coalesced. At the in the 90s and the early 2000s, it was still much more of a sort of a conservative culture, or at least center-right culture. And now the left has become very culturally dominant. And I think a lot of the people who were claiming to have very strong principled commitments to freedom of speech and freedom of expression actually were just sort of cynically using that to advance themselves into positions where they could grab hold of the censor's pen and start using it for themselves.
I think so as well. Well, we're so happy to have you both with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.